start off introducing the idea of the book, or not? You'd like me to answer that question?
Yeah, but I'd like to answer the question, but you can definitely...
I can definitely, yeah.
About the book and give the
Yeah, okay, great. Yeah. Well, the idea behind my book is that what you do for a living matters, that your occupation matters, and it affects your worldview and your politics, and that's something that politicians understand, that advertisers understand. But it's something also that the ancient thinkers understood. And in ancient societies, it was commonly thought that societies were divided between different occupational groups, between fighters or warriors, between merchants, priests or intellectuals, and workers. And in India, that was seen as a caste distinction. There were warriors, there were Brahmins, there were intellectuals and sages, there were merchants. And of course, since those ancient times, those groups have proliferated. There are many more of them. For instance, the sage group has divided into clerics and clerks, or bureaucrats and priests. And then more recently, they've divided again, since the 60s, into creative groups, creative professions, and more bureaucratic professions. And so the argument is that to understand how societies work, we have to understand how these different groups coexist, come into tension, and ally with each other. In different societies, different groups are dominant. So for instance, in Britain and the US, merchant groups are more dominant, I would say, and their values, merchant values, are more dominant than, say, they are in Russia or China. In Russia, I would say warrior groups are rather dominant at the moment. In China, of course, bureaucratic groups are quite dominant, and bureaucratic values. But of course, they coexist and conflict with merchant values. And so, at the same time, in different periods, different values dominate. I would say since the 80s, globally, merchant values have become more dominant. And whereas, say, in the post-World War II period, bureaucratic values were more dominant. Before World War I, warrior aristocratic values were more dominant. Now, I think that in an ideal world, those values would coexist. I don't think one group should be too dominant. I think most recently, the problem has been that merchant values globally have been too dominant. I'm not saying capitalism is the problem. I would say the problem has been a merchant value that has emphasized flexibility, networking. Those are, of course, positive goods. But on the other hand, merchants can bring about a rather overly short-term view of the economy, whereas that needs to be combined with a more sagely view, that is a more long-term view, and of course with a more creative view, that is investing in new technologies. The recent financialization of the world economy has often taken us away from that view towards a rather more short-term financialized view. So yes, the argument would be that what we need is more caste balance, that we've really got, the world has been slightly out of kilter in the last 30 years.